On Network Africa today, Zimbabwe declares state of emergency on cholera outbreak. Kenyan police arrest 8 people involved in colossal scam. Niger's junta chief sets up anti-corruption body. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Anne Nwawado. Let's begin in Zimbabwe, where it has declared a state of emergency in the capital, Harare, over a cholera outbreak. Now, that outbreak has so far killed dozens of people with more than 7,000 suspected cases. The city authorities are saying the outbreak spreading throughout the city has invoked memories of deadly outbreak back in 2008, in which thousands of people died. Authorities are now asking for help to contain the spread and provide safe water, saying that aid being received is inadequate. Health authorities have been struggling to contain the high number of admissions following that outbreak, according to the International Federation of the Red Cross. Zimbabwe's journalist George Msumba joins us now from Harare for more on this. Hello, George.
Hello, Anne. How is everyone in Nigeria?
Very well. Now, give us an update on the cholera outbreak happening in Zimbabwe.
Yes, another outbreak, and we fear that it could be the same situation. We had an outbreak in 2008 and in 2018. And from what the authorities are saying, the latest outbreak could also surpass those figures, although we are hopeful that the authorities will take quick action. As you also mentioned, the numbers now are over 7,000 people who are infected and 50 deaths. And most of the infections are now in Harare. Initially, the disease outbreak was in the rural areas, but it has now affected most parts of Harare, especially one suburb which is called Kuwadzana, which is accounting for 90% of the cholera cases.
And we also understand that more than 7,000 suspected cases, as you mentioned, have been reported already. How are authorities managing and even coping with this huge number?
It's a dire situation because, as you know, in Harare, there has been a staff exodus of nurses. Most nurses have left the country for greener pastures. So you will have a shortage of trained medical personnel to deal with the situation. And add to that the lack of running water. Harare has a perennial problem of running water. The main reservoir is not feeding the whole of Harare, which has expanded. And some people now are resorting to using shallow wells at their households. And now these shallow wells are now infected. And this is where the cholera is thriving, in these shallow wells, because people can go for 7 days without water. And so what do? They go into the shallow wells. But the shallow wells are the death traps where the cholera is breeding.
Now they've identified the death trap. They know that it is because of lack of access to clean water. How is this being addressed to cushion the spread of this disease? What is government doing to ensure people have safe water?
In the short term, they are putting up bowsers. These are water tanks, mobile water tanks, so that people can collect water, which is safe. They're also giving people these disinfectant tablets, which they put into their water so that it's decontaminated. But in the long run, they are looking at building another dam. I think it's around 65% complete now, which will feed Harare so that everyone has running water. But at the moment, the situation has to be dealt with providing this clean water to the thousands of people who are in Harare, who are in these areas which are not receiving tap water, which are not receiving running water from their taps, and also the disinfectant tablets to put into the water so that at least it can mitigate some of the cholera which thrives in these waters.
One can only imagine the mood of many people at the moment. I mean, this is bringing back memories of a deadly outbreak that happened 15 years back in 2008, that killed people. How are people taking this devastating issue at the moment?
This past week, which we are in, people were contemplating to go into the streets to demonstrate against the city authorities to say, look, You have to deal with this situation. Otherwise, we're going to back to the 2008 situation when we lost about 4,000 people throughout the country. And so this is the situation that the people are looking at the authority to say, you have been sitting on this issue for too long. Why have you not resolved this issue? So there were demonstrations which were planned, but it was quickly averted when the mayor and the minister of health went to tour these areas, and they talked to the people, to the residents association, and so it was quelled. So there were not demonstrations.
All right, thank you very much. Zimbabwean journalist George Nsumba, thanks for your time and your contribution on Network Africa. And please stay safe.
Thank you so much.
To other stories, a devastating floods update in Somalia. Residents in the Luke district are recounting their experiences, with some of them having no other option for survival than hitting jerry cans as loud as they can so they can get help. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the floods, which followed heavy rains, killed about at least 32 people, forcing many of them, about 456,800 people, from their homes.
This is Somalia's Luke district. Residents are still trying to make sense of the disaster after floodwaters overtook their villages early this month. We climbed trees the whole night until morning. We were beating jerry cans as a means to call for help. We put babies and the elderly in beds and on trees and slopes. These floods have been going on for 2 weeks. World Vision aid workers reached the village by boat to distribute aid to affected people. According to operations manager of the World Vision Somalia Southern Program, over 400 villages struck by flooding have been rescued.
We have so far rescued over 400 people from the locations that are completely submerged by the water as a result of the heavy rains that was witnessed over the last week, and even the river Juba that has also burst its bank.
The World Food Programme says a quarter of Somalia's population will face crisis-level hunger or worse this year due to drought and floods caused by climate change. Floods that have uprooted hundreds of thousands of people in East Africa following a historic drought earlier this year have been described by the United Nations as a once-in-a-century event.
The Assistant Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Joyce Msuya, has visited Mozambique, where she met with children, women and members of that community. She also visited the country's health education center. Her visit to the East African country is coming ahead of the 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference, often referred to as COP28. Mozambique has been impacted by deadly conflict and climate change that has plunged more than 2 million people into humanitarian need.
I am infused by hope because of the courage of the people that I met, the children that I played with, the medical professionals that I talked to, the district officials, humanitarians that are giving so much. I will end by saying the humanitarian community, the United Nations, including NGOs, national, international NGOs, we are fully committed to continue supporting and complementing the efforts of authorities that are trying to save lives. And also we will continue to work with our development partners on resilience.
8 people have been arrested by the Kenyan police in the warehouse raid in Nairobi, Kenya. According to the police, they are accused of being involved in the colossal scam, which they say has summed up to $439 trillion. The figure has raised eyebrows as it's nearly 200 times the total value of US dollars in global circulation. Authorities say the suspects claim to be transporting cash from Togo to Dubai and needed facilitation from 2 Dutch citizens. Many have questioned the figure the police has given, but the authorities say it has been provided by officials in the Netherlands who are yet to comment on this matter. Niger's military junta chief has officially set up an anti-corruption commission and a state court. Members of the two new bodies swore an oath in front of the ruling junta, General Abdurrahman Tiani. The ceremony was General Tiani's first public appearance since the July 26 coup d'etat that saw the ousting of democratically elected President Mohamed Bazoum. Military chiefs, government members, traditional chiefs, religious figures, and foreign diplomats all attended the inaugurations in the capital, Niamey. This new state court replaces the Court of Cassation and then the State Council, which were dissolved after the coup. The Anti-Corruption Commission's main role will be to recover all illegally acquired and misappropriated public property. As the conflict between Sudan's army and the Rapid Support Forces, the RSF, show no sign of abating, the United Nations is warning the humanitarian crisis in the country is worsening. More than 60,000 people have been killed so far in that conflict that erupted in April, and over 7 million people have been displaced.
The conflict in Sudan has been raging for more than 7 months with no sign of de-escalation. On the contrary, hostilities have intensified in recent weeks. While both warring parties have declared a readiness to negotiate a ceasefire, their actions on the ground suggest otherwise. Sudan is facing a convergence of a worsening humanitarian calamity and a catastrophic human rights crisis. More than 6,000 civilians, including women and children, have been killed since April. Sudan is now the world's largest displacement crisis, with 7.1 million people displaced. The health situation also remains extremely worrying. While a ceasefire must be put in place by the warring parties, no durable solution can emerge without engaging civilians as the paramount stakeholders in a political process. Given the dramatically changed circumstances on the ground since the outbreak of the conflict, the Secretary General has initiated a strategic review of UNITAMS to provide this Council with options on how to adapt the mission's mandate to better fit the current context. This will help ensure that the mission's objectives and priorities adequately reflect the needs of the Sudanese people and support Sudan on its path towards peace and stability. It is high time that the warring sides recognize the futility of continued fighting and prioritize dialogue and de-escalation. It is also important that the situation in Sudan does not fall off the international radar, but rather that the international community renews its commitment to revitalize collective and coordinated peace efforts under the leadership of the region.
When we return in just a moment on Network Africa, injured Palestinians by Gaza bombing receive treatment in Egypt. We'll have that story and more in just a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Injured Palestinians have been receiving treatment in Egypt, and that's after being evacuated from Gaza through the Rafah border crossing. This month, Egypt has received a limited number of medical evacuees, most of whom have been taken to Egyptian hospitals for treatment. 2 boys had their legs amputated, with one saying that he was shocked to wake up after an operation and see just one leg, and crying after the realization that he had his leg amputated. An injured woman said much of her family, including a number of her children, have been killed. A WHO spokesperson believes that Al Arish Hospital in Egypt is likely to be the first referral hospital and is now working with the Egyptian government on planning and establishing a comprehensive stabilization and medical evacuation system, including providing additional medical supplies and mental health support for victims. The first evacuations of patients from Gaza to hospitals outside Egypt took place on November the 15th, when 27 cancer patients were flown to Turkey from Al Arish Hospital. And right here in Nigeria, the federal government has declared a state of emergency on Nigeria's health sector. This was highlighted by the coordinating Minister for Health and Social Welfare, Dr. Mohammed Ali Pate, who was speaking at the 64th National Council on Health held in Ekiti State, southwest Nigeria. He asked the state ministries of health to work with the federal government to ensure quality health services for all Nigerians.
Your Excellency, you're very much welcome, sir.
The arrival of the Ekiti State Governor, Biodo Yebanji, senior federal and state government officials and international stakeholders kickstarts the 64th National Council on Health held in Ado-Ekiti, the Ekiti State capital. State commissioners and other key players in the health sector are here to deliberate on how to build resilience and inclusive healthcare systems for Nigeria. The coordinating Minister for Health and Social Welfare, Dr. Mohammed Ali Pate, who is leading the course for better healthcare systems, says the federal government is ready to work with state governments to reshape the sector.
It is pertinent to note that health is on the residual list of our constitution, and the country is only as strong as its weakest link. To shift the needle, we require the full cooperation of state governments to ensure that health is put on the front burner of our priorities. And in doing this, the National Council on Health is the pioneer platform for effectively mobilizing the states to work with the federal government.
The host governor uses the opportunity to highlight what has been done by the state government to improve the health sector and seeks the cooperation of more partners to do more for the people of Ekiti State.
Embracing digital transformation is imperative in the 21st century, and nowhere is this more critical than in the health sector. The Ekiti State is committed to harnessing the power of technology to enhance health information systems, streamline processes, and improve healthcare delivery. Hence, our eagerness to collaborate on initiatives that leverage digital solutions for the betterment of our health sector.
Decisions reached at this National Health Council meeting will go a long way in reshaping health services in the country, particularly at the primary healthcare level.
The Economic Community of West African States is set to launch the West African Power Pool Information and Coordination Center in Benin Republic. This formed part of moves to ensure energy sustainability in West Africa and to shore up productivity and development among member nations. The Secretary General of the West Africa Power Pool, Mr. Ki Sengui, stated this at a media briefing in Cotonou, the capital of Benin Republic. Our correspondent Kayla Megwa reports.
Moves to solidify a regional trade market for the West African sub-region are now in high gear, with this press conference in Abome Kalavi, a suburb in Cotonou, the capital of Benin Republic. It's part of preparations to inaugurate the West Africa Power Pool Information and Coordination Center, which will be housed right here in Benin Republic. Buying and selling electricity among the 14 member nations is considered as the final solution to the lack of access to electricity and incessant power cuts among member countries.
This building is a revolution in the area of electrical power in West Africa. WAP is getting a sustainable solution to the issues of power cuts and load shedding in the region through a regulated interactive market at a regional level.
The European Union Development Fund played a key role in setting up the building that houses the center and the necessary equipment, as well as other national control centers across the sub-region. The EU delegation explains that more investments are underway for the region.
We as the EU are committed to provide electricity at an affordable cost in West Africa, which will drive growth and development in the region. Regional growth in this sector must go beyond individual capacities of member countries. We have a good partnership and are glad West Africa is leading with this initiative on the African continent.
As the media are taking round to the WAP market room and the control center, member countries are reminded of the importance of regional cooperation and progress in electric energy within the ECOWAS region. This electricity project actually cost 30 million euros, funded, of course, by the European Union. And that money encompasses not just this building right behind me, but also all the coordination equipment in West Africa. The idea is to encourage African countries to buy and sell electricity from each other, knowing that they are being coordinated and that regional rules in electricity trade are being adhered to. It's a significant move. The launch, of course, will be coming up on Friday. Today was a press briefing, getting people ready for that launch. And it's expected that at that launch, all the players in the electricity sector in West Africa will be present. And of course, all the questions about costing and coordination will be answered, of course, by the ICC. But they want all African countries to join this particular movement and be a part of the ECOWAS Heads of State and Government plan of ensuring energy sustainability in West Africa. From Abome in Benin Republic, Kayla Megwa, Channels Television News.
And finally on the program today, the dialogue is the theme for this year's ArtX Fair. It was chosen to spark conversations among artists and guests about critical issues, one of which is how immigration affects those who have left the country and those who stayed behind. ArtX Lagos, which concluded on November the 5th, provides a platform for artists to connect and discuss positive change for Africa.
A sitting area reminiscent of Nigeria's 60s and 70s era, complete with antique green-flowered fabric armchairs, a VHS cassette player, and framed graduation pictures, was one of the many pieces on display at this year's ArtX Fair in Lagos. Titled The Hands That Remain and curated by Papa Omotayo and Max Kalawo, this space brings back nostalgic memories of Nigeria and ignites conversations on how immigration affects life in Nigeria, as well as the lives of those in new communities in other countries. Lawyer Fetupai and a friend walking on the scene, feeling and looking at pieces that remind them of a time long ago and people whom they may never see again.
We came in here and you said, oh, and I might also live. It's the reality for people in their 20s and 30s, right, to seek opportunities. We also know that there are opportunities here and around Africa. So either way, it's a time to embrace the opportunities that are there. We have to make adjustments. So you know that time zones are different, calls will be different, but we then have to ensure that we're nurturing the relationships, whether the relationships are here in Lagos or they're in London or they're in Germany. We have to do the work to preserve our friendships.
In another room, guests watch a visual display of how Nigerian artists combine words and images to critique and challenge narratives and the absence of women cartoonists until the 1990s.
When I entered this room, it made me realize for how I started art, how I started with scribbles, the flashback it gave me and everything. And I really appreciate ArtX for bringing something like this up. It helps the artists and also viewers to remember how they started, how art has evolved up to now.
Hundreds of Nigerians are leaving the country and causing a brain drain that is punishing even for a nation used to losing its young and educated. The phenomenon dubbed Japa, meaning to flee in Yoruba, impacts nearly every sector and has stretched a weak healthcare system.
Our theme this year, the dialogue, was very carefully chosen. As a team, we looked around and we said to ourselves, there's so much happening. Whoever you are, whatever your level, there's a challenge somewhere. And how can we pull people into a place where we can reflect, we can converse, we can learn, and we can together start to think about how we wish to move ourselves forward, how we wish to move our societies forward.
A Nigerian artist living in Vienna, Belinda Kazim Kaminski, presents a series of photographs that remind one of West Africa's past studio photography. She believes ArtX can be a platform that connects various people across the continent to network and create future projects after the fair. Artex is an annual art fair held in Lagos, attracting guests from across Africa and beyond.
And on that creative note, we end Network Africa for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Anne Nwawado. Have a wonderful weekend.